be a quaba at the bar or Mati so. Send a the latest news, any news about from one and the Bromo. And then the Bromo nation, who remember if so like a commenting. Over subscribe and watch any notification bell on site to me about summer. Send a news about one side to me a kind of first. Midi Eddie Obi or Sitch Namadi Casibo Ebram. Now you go right this morning, so my gun and Moody just at the China, the Sembiano, in semi person, the so catch it. Send good news and I just say bad news. Send me a MPP and I just say NDC, just a semi person, the so catch it. I have 2024 election, Cassian, it to be a question. My gun and I share Papa, no so and so about to say, send the reaction is the Sembian so catch it. Will be a one more they say after 2024. No, go to me, do Panels be so to Macosi on a catchy, anyway, parties are phenomenal. No, be a one more in Tino, Obia, my shan, send me to me a person. I hear send me a person, you might put a reaction and send my person is winning and so catching my uncle, then put a reaction and send the city and so on.
Giving to the comments that the NDC have made. The fact that he said we have the men doesn't mean that he's going to break cutlasses and guns onto the streets to come and fight. Of course, there are laws, rules and regulations that guide how people who come forth with violence should be dealt with. My point here is this: let's be consistent in our political conversations. Let's be fair to all the divide. We should stop picking and choosing, because you see, if you pick and choose, then when I am speaking, I would go and pick the one you did not pick and show it to you, and that is why we are where we are. But the Champion's commentary had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with violence. If we are to go into people who have made violent comments in this country, and not only made the comments, but they haven't only said it. And I heard your point about act speech or speech act. The NDC only don't say it, they do it. They act it, they live it. We have seen violence in Ododio, we have seen violence in Talensi, we have seen violence in Amenfi, we have seen violence in Akwetia. The NDC live violence. And so if anybody who is a keen political watcher in this country is very serious about protecting our elections and our democracy, says that when the NDC rises up with violence, we are going to show them that we have the men, that person is the last person we should condemn. And if you are going to condemn him, then I want to see the same level of measure and condemnation. Go for the NDC. So you see,
while you do this, and hold on a bit. While you do this, and you go down history and do the equalization and all the analysis.
Don't use the word equalization. Okay, it is abused.
Hold on.
Don't use the word equalization. It is a way of trying to gag others from speaking.
Let me make the point.
Yeah, but don't use equalization.
Hold on. You cannot tell me what to say.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
I think I need to make that quite clear. It is the Ghanaian people who are the victims of said violence or whatever happens, and that's one thing that I want you to bear in mind.
I agree. Doesn't change the fact
that is on both sides. Whatever happens, it is the Ghanaian people.
I haven't mentioned the other side,
who are going to be the victims of the violence.
I agree.
So as we make progress and we seek to grow in our democracy, how do we do that if we continue to look back to justify what has been done today?
Perfect. I agree with you, Alfred, and that is why, for me, my rule in this conversation is to draw all of us our attention, because that pretense and that gag element that we always introduce when we try to have a conversation, that equalization is the reason why we are where we are today. You are saying that the person involved in the Bernard Champong comment is the reason why we should take the statement seriously. I have read to you the Commander-in-Chief of the Republic, who is saying that they have revolutionary roots, and that if anybody has the capacity to unleash violence in this country, nobody can beat them. I don't think we should just say that because he said it 2 months ago, we should ignore it. 2 months ago, I didn't hear this conversation around that statement. A year ago when he said it, I didn't hear a week-long discussion around that statement. And that is why tomorrow you have another person also go and say the same thing, not because of what Brian said, but because of what the former president said. Because if we are going to use the personalities involved, then I can say that Brian, myself, Honorable Nina Tevadapo will pick the vibe from the former president than any other person. I am not equalizing. I am not trying to say that they have done it, so we are going to do it. I am only saying that let us be fair to the conversation, then we can get results. But if we're not fair to the conversation, if you're not balanced to the conversation, Alfred, we will never get anywhere. again, if we are to really interpret the words and the comments and the statement made by all these political functionaries, then Brian's comment is the least of all the weights. If we are to listen to it, we heard about 2 months ago the Swami youth organizer of the NDC. He said we are going to kill. He used it. He didn't even make a comment that requires.
Well, guess what? He was picked up by the police. He was picked up by the police.
Perfect.
So would you say that the police should pick up Brian Champon?
Brian didn't say he was going to kill. Brian never said he was going to unleash violence. Brian never said he was going to use guns and cutlasses. That is your interpretation. But that is your interpretation. Brian never said anything anywhere. If Brian says that we will never hand over power, he says that we will not hand over power if you use violence. But why? Why should any government hand over power to a violent opposition? You see, you are going to interpret what he said, but that's his interpretation. That is his explanation. You don't want to buy it, but you want us to buy the interpretation and the explanation that you are giving to do a boot for boot and then unleashing violence. How can this be a fair conversation?
Professor Kobe makes the point earlier about the impact and the interpretation of statements that are made. Okay, so if you are admitting that the interpretation given to a statement by a person would not be what you as a party subscribe to, that concern that he raised earlier about, for instance, on election day, when your supporters, after hearing this statement from Brian Champon, even when the Electoral Commission pronounces the elections and it goes on the other side because of this, and remember, you're talking about the interpretation which you will not have control over at that constituency or on that ground on that day. What do you take responsibility for? Whatever.
You see, this is the issue of the pick and choose. By the time we get to election 2024, Prof, won't Brian's comment also be in the past? You are telling me that former President Mahama's comments is in the past, so we shouldn't bring it up. Brian's comment will be in the past. So if anybody will act on Brian's very mild comments, which is yes, because it's based on your interpretation. Well, Brian never used killed, he never used violence, he never used guns, he never used cutlasses. That is fact. I mean, you can't say anything else. You see, my principle is that our conversation should be grounded on facts. Like Prof said, my children will come and read me in the future. And that's why I make sure that anything I say is something that makes a lot of logic and sense. Brian never said anything specifically to this effect. Everything we are doing, it's our own interpretation. And yet, the man who said that when it comes to unleashing violence, nobody can beat them. You are saying that people will not pick on that vibe from the former president, but people will go and pick a vibe from Brian. Come on, what are we doing to ourselves? And when we say it, you get your time. And when you say it, people will say that of my time. When you say it, people will say that, the Ghanaian people are watching. And I can tell you, the Ghanaian people are actually watching. The Ghanaian people are too smart now. Too smart to fall for these things. They can read in between the lines. They can see how you pick Brian Champon's statement and ignore former President Mahama's statement. They can see how you ignore a Stephen Kettia's statement at the NDC elections where he said they are going to sacrifice their lives. Okay? And then come and pick on Brian Champon's statement. The Ghanaian people are reading. They are not daft. And when we say Ghanaian people, it's as if those of us sitting here, we are not Ghanaians. We are Ghanaians. I am coming from a Ghanaian community. I hear what they say. They know that between the MPP and NDC, if you can point out evidence of violence, it is the NDC, and the facts are there. Palensi is there, Akwetia is there, Amenfi is there, Ododo is there, Adegboshi is there. We can count. We can count. Is there. We can count. We can count. So as I conclude, I mean, you asked me a question. Let me just conclude. So as I conclude, my point this morning is that we are not doing ourselves any good if we continue to have the conversations in this manner. It's fair if you say that my interpretation to Brian's statement is this, but give the gentleman the benefit of the doubt and listen to his explanation to it, especially when he wasn't emphatic. If you do that, then we'll be helping our democracy. Otherwise, when you mention Brian and call him out, call former President Mahama out, so call Mosquito out.
Let me bring you but there is that fundamental
Oman Ghana mu de oman mu aye shi papa ye upcoming election kese betuma koso wo ya 2024 no onum so oman Ghana mu de je say latest news and je say some koso na se wini ensa ka kire se nye good news na ye bad news je say afi 2024 election kese betuma koso no parties afi nim na no MPP ni NDC je say CPP mu na no bi abon mo de say obetumi edi nkuna je say yetuma man 2 million na je say betuma be bo chuma de oman Ghana ntino ya ba de sana oman ni mu aye shi papa obi a hwe nim say obebo no mo de man say mo de go tuma so Ghana fo ni ma bi aso yetuma koso ya no so nsem so ba bontia me so me de ebro mi ntino obetumi akọ comment section na akọ kire wadwen wo ye je say reaction na say latest news so ba bontia obetumi akọ kire wadwen so comment section na nya bra me so metuma kan bo bi aboso ato ne yem aha akroma TV so me ma we fi so be like be comment obe subscribe no wa share na notification bell no on site etumi aboso ma se ne be ya news about bontia on site betumi aka no first me din e de obi game bo search bi na me ka segwe ebra mu makram